Lord Dannatt, a very good morning to you.
Morning. Good morning.
This situation, Mark was saying last week when he spoke to you, didn't believe there would be conflict, a further incursion. Are you still of that mind?
Well, yes, good morning. I am still of that mind. I agree that on the one hand, you could say that the signs don't look encouraging, and it's a proven fact through intelligence that's been well sourced that the Russian armed forces have now built their capability up, not just with combat troops, but with combat enablers as well, so that there is no doubt that they have the overall capability to launch an attack. But whether they do or don't still relies on the decision, and that decision will be taken by Vladimir Putin. So it makes complete sense that the war of words, the diplomacy, continues. And I think Vladimir Putin is weighing up a lot of things very carefully in his mind, one of which Mark Wright's already referred to, and that is that the Ukrainian armed forces themselves are not inconsiderable, in number well over 200,000, in capability much more capable, much more useful than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago. And they will give good account for themselves. And I think the other thing just to bear in mind as far as war and conflict is concerned, there are several components of conflict. There is the physical component, the tanks and the guns, and we know that the Russians have got a lot of those. Then there's the moral component, which actually is the will to fight and the will to win. And there's no doubt that the Ukrainians love their country passionately and will fight for their country. And the third element is what we call the conceptual element. And actually, right is on their side. They have the absolute right to defend their sovereignty. And we have the right to support them in defending that sovereignty. So Vladimir Putin has got a lot to weigh up. And if I read other media reports correctly this morning, I think later this morning on your program, you're going to have the Ukrainian ambassador. And he has begun to say something very helpful, which is that Ukraine may not pursue its application to join NATO. And of course, it would not be alone in not joining NATO. Sweden, Finland, for example, are not NATO members. So Ukraine could find a way out in a diplomatic sense by not pursuing at this stage its application to join NATO.
And how harmful would that be? I mean, you say it'd be very helpful, certainly in, staving off the threat of war at the moment, immediate threat. But the long-term message, surely, then, to Putin is that if he flexes his muscles, builds up troops, bullies the West, then eventually he gets what he wants, which is to stop a sovereign nation increasing their defences.
Yes, you can argue that, but I think you've got to look at it again from Mr. Putin's point of view and from the point of view of a lot of Russian people. Ukraine, in many Russians' minds, is part of Greater Russia. Nikita Khrushchev, that well-known former Soviet leader, he was from Ukraine. So Ukraine has a very special place in Russian people's minds. Now, on that basis, Ukraine stands apart from other former Soviet dominated countries that became independent after the end of the Cold War. And they became independent. They chose to join the EU. They chose to join the Partnership for Peace programme and indeed NATO, because they were only communist as a result of the end of the Second World War. The conquest by the Red Army in 1943, 44 and 45 made those countries communist. Ukraine is different. Many Russians feel that Ukraine is part of Greater Russia. So it puts itself into a very different category. And Belarus, of course, is the same. But no question of Belarus being anything other than in the Russian sphere. So the best position for Ukraine is for Ukraine to be independent, to be neutral. Ukraine does not want to be part of any formal Russian alliance. And if it was to give up its claim, its wish, its apparent wish to join NATO, it would take a lot of the sting out of this. We can go on being very friendly with Ukraine. We can support Ukraine. We can support Ukraine in its right to be independent and to be sovereign. I think that's a very honourable position. And that is a very helpful formula for de-escalating this situation.